Wonderful. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks Liz for the intro. And thanks Val for reassuring me this is a chill space. Expectations be damned. I said earlier before the recording started that I've noticed people's tolerance and good graces and general attitudes about punctuality have become extremely inelastic, rigid, and fussy under a pandemic 5 years in now, which is normal, fine. You know, we don't have a lot of uh, kindness on the internet in general, so it's hard to keep dishing it out without receiving much back. This is a short talk about what are meetings, and I'm going to do my best to give a little general theory. I'm going to share a little syllabus, and I'm going to have everybody share a little bit what they've been up to lately. If it's possible to chime in with some things we've been reading, we'll get to that later. But before we also started recording, I asked, where was the last bad meeting you were in? And what made it so bad? And I asked this because there's a lot that we can learn from our own experiences, especially when we study them together. And so I'm going to read just one anonymously. This morning, I helped chaperone bike to school at my kid's school. Most of my bad meetings involve some people talking too much and other people talking too little. So it's nice to have the contrast of how our mornings were and then some meetings in general. If only a meeting was more biking our kids to school and less Zooming. Another, I'll read off, calling from Tbilisi. Oh, I don't know Georgian places. Anyway, I believe capital of Georgia. Spent my morning studying Georgian and actually had a very enjoyable meeting. The last bad meeting, I love when people transliterate or write their actual verbiage or whatever you'd call that expressions. The last bad meeting, conflicting ideas about what we were meeting about in the first place. Happy to be in this meta meeting. How appropriate for Metagov. Okay, and then one last one. Hi all. Last bad meeting went off the rails, like my subway this morning almost, because the facilitator let a couple folks dominate and get way off topic. And I wanted to add that one at the end because what is modernity or modern life without some awful forms of domination tendencies? Okay, bonus. This just came in the chat. Last bad meeting, the SF San Francisco Board of Supervisors meeting, where San Francisco Police Department were trying to explain their overtime abuse. Overtime pay for police officers has become, I think, something like $91 million in overrun costs or cost overruns or what have you. Life in America, for those of you who aren't here, every city's getting all the damn money they want for cops and complaining about it at the same time, the cops. So meetings, all kinds. This is a zine launch for a syllabus. I guess I should say the zine is a syllabus, and it was based off of a learning club and reading group at a place called Bather's Library that's based in Oakland. I am going to share with you a little sneak preview of the zine, and then we're going to have some open chat. Oopsie. All right. The reason I did this learning club, and I hope this is a little dose of inspiration for you all to borrow, is there was a book I knew about, and I always referenced because the title is just so appropriate. I'm a sociologist by trade, and I love the sort of poetic opportunities you get every so often to give a really good title or to really name a phenomenon based on people's way of describing it. And so this woman, Francesca Paletta, a professor of sociology, wrote a book about the civil rights era and the free speech movement and women's liberation and consciousness raising in the sort of, let's call it 30s to 70s in the US, you know, because these things have long um, origin stories. The name of the book is Freedom is an Endless Meeting. And I love the title. I never read the book, but I would go around and be like, "Oh, this book is that," you know. And I like knew just a few bits, but I said, "Okay, I got to read this book finally." And I said that in specific because this person, Justin Carter, who runs this community space, you can see the photo behind this ad is a little sneak preview of it, was opening a what he called a low-cost art school for freaks. And it's basically just a big room in Oakland with lots of books. And they had open call for reading groups, learning clubs, whatever you want to do for a few weeks or a few months. And I thought I would organize this learning club to read this book with other people because I had not, it felt so antithetical to read a book fundamentally about this building block of democracy or democratic ways of life, let's say, by myself. So I pitched this. It was one of the few classes that got offered this past year, this past fall. And I also, for those of you who are ancient enough, may remember 30 Rock, which was a comedy on running on, I don't know, 5 or 6 years maybe, with Alec Baldwin and others, who's a cliche of or of an executive in a combination TV network and microwave oven manufacturer. And he subscribed to Meetings Magazine. He was always going on about it and how effective he was at everything. So meetings are a weird sort of set of spectrums from civil rights era meetings to corporate garbage where you're talking about TV programming and microwave ovens. And that's what we talked about, the whole range of things. It was 12 people and no one knew each other, which was really wild because it was, again, this low-cost art school for freaks. People signed up to just show up and see what happened. And so I'm going to give you now the general theory of meetings that we came up with, and then a sneak preview of the contents, and then we'll get into some chit chat. The sort of shorthand and also the subtitle for this zine is How Do We Want to Be Together? That, I think, explains a lot of what a meeting is or could be. And the be together, not to get too philosophical, and there's a lot of traditions of what it means to be. You may be in a meeting like I was, where your project manager was a former weapons contractor middle manager who loves to watch flight traffic over Los Angeles airport on a second monitor and tell you about planes going in and out before you get to the thing he forced you to do, which is give a status update on stuff that's way too complex and in motion to summarize into a few words, while he fussily insists that you stay on his agenda to break your flow of deep work on extremely complex data collection and analysis about worker ownership in California for low-wage sectors and job quality and firm performance results that ended up being 314 pages. And this guy who doesn't know academic work, he again worked at Lockheed Martin until recently, is trying to drag you through his agenda to make, I suppose, some form of job security and sense of purpose in the world. He's a nice guy. But how he wanted to be together with me was not how I wanted to be together with him. And that's just two people. Other times we have Metagov, which I love, and I encourage you all to check out the Slack community. One of the few Slack communities after a pandemic rolling that still has positivity and levity and intrigue and substance. And there's many other kinds of meetings we talked about in our 4 weeks together of this session, but all kinds of meetings I think this general theory might apply to. Sorry for the little grammar roller coaster. So here's what we ended up getting into in the contents. I just want to appreciate a couple comments coming up, and maybe I'll pause here briefly before we get into the big reveal of the contents. Christy and Jonathan and Gavin and B had a few comments. And other folks may have some stuff bubbling up. So let's pause for about 3-4 minutes to take one or two comments or expressions, since we haven't had that yet, and I've been prattling on for about 15 minutes. So anyone who's been chatting in the chat or who's been chatting their head, want to come on mic and say something out loud, I would welcome a few contributions. It's open mic, open floor.
I'll
Go
just
for it
say
if you'd
something
like to.
quickly, if I may. I'm currently enrolled at a community college, which is an amazing mix of retirees, the unemployed, recently discharged veterans, 19-year-olds, and literal high schoolers. And so we've made one of our clubs, we've made the absolute youngest member president. I mean, we elected him. And which is fantastic. But also, there's like a lot of skills missing. So our last worst meeting was just somebody else presided, and he didn't entitle himself to preside. I don't think that it even occurred to him that he should be that presiding is what a president does. Thanks.
I'll confess that that conjugation of president and presiding just was new to me too in this very moment. Um, you can raise your hand, as Val said, if you'd like to get on stack, so-called, another bit of jargon for getting in the queue or the line for chatting, or you can just get on mic. Equal opportunity, I suppose. Go ahead, B.
A bunch of us were just chatting about how incredible Low Cost Art School for Freaks is in terms of a name. And it makes me think about how many meetings, some meetings people show up for because they're required to, and some meetings people show up for because they just sound intriguing. I know that within my work context, even though many of the meetings are essentially required, it can be fun to still try to bring some levity to the meeting names. So I appreciate Low Cost Art School for Freaks, and yeah, I'm excited to hear more about how the kind of like consent and voluntary nature of meetings shapes how we actually show up in those spaces, and like what we can do about the fact that there are meetings that we got to go to.
Christy, you want to go next?
Sure, thanks. This is my first meeting. I take another class at Bather's Library on art monstering, which is the intersection of motherhood and creativity. And I'm working on a project called the Togathering Lab. And when I saw the subtitle about, how we want to be together, it just feels to me so relevant for the questions my partner and I are always asking about our kids and our family, and the questions that I think we're asking in our politics, because we sort of, fortunately or unfortunately, have to be together. And so how that happens feels like a very fundamental and relevant question. So thanks for asking it.
I'll jump in.
Yeah, and then I think Steve raised a hand. Am I right? So go ahead,
Oh,
Mark,
I'm
and then
sorry.
Steve, and then no, it's all right. It's all right. Keep rolling.
Okay, I'll be quick. I'll mention very background in lots of things that have touched on governance and certainly been to my share of meetings. And honestly, I full transparency, I went through a layoff about a month ago, and have been using that opportunity to really dive into some of the projects and learnings that I've been waiting to get a chance to do. And this is one of those. But I'm here today almost in a whimsical way because I found myself missing Zoom meetings in a weird way. Like without the structure of some meetings, even the boring ones, even the redundant ones, there is a certain type of work signaling or something that it gives to psychologically gives to me a little bit. So I kind of wanted to tap in just to get some social uh, you know scheduling back into my life a little bit, and the topic couldn't have been more appropriate. So I'm enjoying kind of in this meta sense kind of the structure of what this is all about. So thank you for having me.
Really appreciate that. Let's see who else would like to share. We don't have to, because I do have a little more to present, but I think Steve raised a hand. And if anyone, I'd like to try to tip the balance or sort of reweight the scale. If there's anyone who's like, maybe I should share something, but not read, maybe not, because what? Take this as an invitation to try if you'd like, and you were hesitant. Literally be my guest, be our guest to contribute something if you don't typically get the chance to. So Steve, and then did I see a hand? Yes, okay. Steve, then Drew, then we'll keep powering on.
Actually, I think I was only just making an okay sign because I was really
Never mind.
appreciating Christie's you know, glasses retainer. This it's like a yarn glass. It's really fantastic. I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna try and make something like that for myself. That looks awesome."
Fantastic.
And I do just want to hear what this
Yeah,
process up, because I could talk your ear about this stuff for hours with specific solutions, but
Great.
I don't want to do that. I want to hear.
Okay, we've got, I'll just two things. Christy, your so-called, what did someone call it? Granny chain. Yeah, if there's I'd like to verbally say the chat we will and should use as a space for kinds of community announcements. So if folks have any requests, like I just left a job or the job left me, or folks are like, I have a new pattern for knitting a granny chain for my glasses. Maybe that's what you actually needed, Mark, was something for your glasses. And maybe Christy, you're trying to hire someone. Anyway, so please use the chat for requests and offers of all kinds. The magic of sort of parallel play here for talking and typing. We'll let that run throughout the whole. And then as for Pat Kahn, who just joined, the prompt for folks introducing themselves, and I think a few folks may have joined in addition, where you're coming from and when was the last bad meeting you were in? What made it so bad? Although just now we were kind of free form, sharing other comments about our space. So feel free to use the chat for requests and offers of all kind. Feel free to introduce yourself if you haven't yet. And then Drew, chime in a bit, and then we'll get back to sharing the big reveal for this zine and syllabus.
I was just going to touch on like a sense of obligation that I think a lot of people experience with meetings, and this sense of like having to be there. And I feel like maybe some other people have brought this up, but actually like wanting to be in connection and being passionate or being interested around, subject matters and hearing what people have to say. It's a distinction and like a possibility that's it's there.
Yeah, obligation. That's an uncomfortable one to reckon with, eh? Especially being a member of society and trying to suss out what we can and cannot be part of. All right, so that might be a nice provocation of a sort to get into the guts of this zine. So again, for folks who may have just joined previous to seeing this, this is the cover page. You're going to be able to see the digital and print version in a hot sec. And the subtitle, again, was How Do We Want to Be Together? That came out of this 4-week learning club. And what I'm trying to do is, in presenting this, give you all a tangible feel for what we did. So you might even try to do one of these yourselves. That's why it's a syllabus. You can, hack it, fork it, adapt it, adopt it, however you like, mix and match, draw from just the readings. We'll get into them in a sec. All right, the contents. There was a general theory, like I shared a second ago. There's a little more on that inside the cover page. But the structure and flow of the first meeting was a bit specific. And then the next few meetings, the next 3 meetings, was based on that. And then there's a list of all the reading material we gathered. In the first meeting, what we did was ask everyone, when was the last bad meeting you had? What was it like? What made it so bad for you? And we had small groups of, I told you earlier, there was 12 people who came together, and then there were groups of 3 or 4 that chatted about bad meetings of all kinds. And the group was stunningly diverse. I know this is not easy to recreate, but like I mentioned, it was 12 people who didn't know each other. There was a woman who was a nurse and a union member. There was a woman who does textile engineering. There was a woman who does political canvassing and like door knocking and coordinating field outreach, if you will, field campaigns. There was a woman who does disaster preparedness plus all kinds of other resilience and ecology work. And so we all had a variety of meetings to draw from and a variety of experiences that were quite contrasting. And we shared all these sticky notes based on our few minutes of talking through what our bad meetings were. If you can see it and you have to squint a little, we had a bunch of items in here, and then we had a bunch of themes in yellow, like no goal, no agenda, or it felt high conflict, or there was no good facilitation. But there are also more juicy stuff like, let me see if I can squint and read one of these. Embarrassing. There's a picture of a pumpkin for some reason. You know, and other more somatic things like bad acoustics, right? So I think Zoom has actually gotten really good lately because it cancels out passing police sirens, which we can only cancel that out more realistically. But we took this set of themes that bubbled up from this first session where we all shared a little bit about bad meetings, and then we used that to sort of pivot or maybe pirouette into, okay, these are some themes that matter to us. The next 3 meetings are going to be taking up the 3 topics in order of what felt most palpable and most pressing. So the rest of the zine after that is a set of agendas, roughly, and a little bit of commentary of what happened for those 3 subsequent meetings. The first one was about objectives and procedures, goals, agendas, the whole kit and caboodle that you might typically associate with a somewhat corporate, somewhat production-oriented context. Then it was feelings and relationships, which was a radical departure where we used dialogue by David Baum, which is a hyper identity forward, conflict prone space in which you try to just be together. You try to suspend some of the principles of a typical meeting. You suspend judgment of all kinds, and it's really hard to do. The person who facilitated it was a former Occupy Oakland organizer and a real old head in terms of a lot of different labor and solidarity movement struggles, and felt like it was a therapeutic move for him. So, you know, as I said, quite a contrast from the corporate objectives, procedures, and so on. And then the last one was about materiality and embodiment. So I mentioned a moment ago, acoustics, or, you know, the seating, or as someone said a moment ago, just, you know, it's nice to be in a Zoom call again. Mark was sharing that, getting back into a schedule. Whoops, hold on. And there's more, obviously, like I said, there's commentary and agendas for these 3 subsequent meetings in the zine, but I'm gonna actually kind of clickety click, one sec. So we're gonna talk about what we're reading lately next in relation to this, because I thought it occurred to us as this was a reading group / learning club, the thing that we didn't do much of during and kind of before or after was actually the readings. There was a lot of reading material I organized, but reading is in many ways, you know, an opposite or a sharp contrast from a regular meeting. Because when you're in a meeting with folks, you want to be in dialogue, or you want to be observing each other or collaborating with your sleeves rolled up on something. And reading is relatively solitary practice, and by you know, more mechanical kind of reality than conceptual, right? Like you have to read a page, and it's maybe you read with a friend or loved one side by side, but you're still photons shooting into your own eyes and your brain is trying to make sense of them, or whatever accessibility means through which you get to read. So we'll talk about what we've been reading lately, because indeed that does call up a lot of fun things and kind of smash categories together. But I wanted to also share what we had for our readings here. And also, as this meeting itself is an invite to not just get the syllabus, but to contribute, buy, borrow, steal, share back, donate, what have you, materials to this shared drive we have. So I'm going to take just 2 minutes to summarize a few of the essential readings that really underpinned the 4 meetings we had. Because again, as I said a moment ago, my hope is that you all can find some way to take the whole thing or pieces thereof and repurpose this learning club for your own, with some folks some parenting groups, some neighborhood groups, some community college peers, whatever. So I'm going to flag a few readings here, and then we'll open up the floor for what you've been reading lately. Sorry to be redundant. I've had a lot of different weird pedagogy experiences, and I've kind of got a bias for repetitiveness. Okay, my favorite readings, and I thought the ones that were most instructive and most useful. Obviously, the first one, Freedom is an Endless Meeting, as I mentioned, was an inspiration for the thing in the first place. That goes into all kinds of really high stakes organizing meetings in the civil rights and free speech and women's liberation, consciousness raising movements of the past century. And it's just really well written. It's ethnographic interviews, archival research with a lot of these elders now who have done scary new stuff in a context that was rather unsympathetic to building power and eventually, hopefully, changing some laws that won't get changed back. The participant, briefly, is a sort of anthropological review of 4 kinds of participation, which I know a lot of us in governance nerd circles think participation is super great, and it is often, but this goes into going native tourism, which was big in the 1880s, 1890s. Not awesome, actually, it turns out, but being a participant in different ways can be kind of awkward. And then it talks about LBJ's urban renewal in Philadelphia, one of the most racist urban planning schemes, but incredibly participatory. Excellent meetings. Technically, on paper, the most dynamic civic innovation you've ever seen, stuff that I haven't seen as well performed in the last few years or last few decades of like younger people, I guess, since the 60s, getting into like trying to make urban places great and nice. But again, super fucking racist, excuse me. And then I wanted to focus on 2 others that are less, let's say, subject matter dense and more tactical and brief. So those are books. There's another one by this person, Cam Daigle. They're a product designer in a corporate software company. Cam talks about 3 kinds of meetings. There's the status meeting, which is read only, report out, just straight text or words out to folks, a stand up, sometimes people call it. Then Cam argues there's a feedback meeting where people are giving feedback on something presented. And then third, there's a decision-making meeting. Decision-making is, as you can imagine, where you deliberate and you try to choose amongst options and look at scenario. No. What we did with that for the second meeting was we choreographed and performed, and this is in the zine, those 3 meetings in order. So we asked for folks to give feedback, or to do a status update on how this learning club was going, just 2 meetings in. That got really uncomfortable because people felt an urge to start giving feedback. And so that broke into the second kind of meeting where people are like, yeah, well, I felt like we haven't had enough embodiment here. And I don't really know everyone. I heard there's a nurse and a textile engineer. And so then feedback got going and people wanted to learn more about each other and maybe experiment with different formats. And then that eventually broke into the third kind of meeting, which was a decision making. And that end of that hour and a half, we decided together to do a radically different kind of meeting for the third meeting, which was a dialogue. And that's this down here, an excerpt from this book by David Bohm on a very difficult to perform kind of space in which you talk about your identities and you seek contrasts between identities, not production obligations or your roles, your responsibilities, your material interests, even, which maybe a sort of Marxist bias would have you name that, but you know. And then the final meeting was based on this relatively obscure short story called Some of Us Had Been Threatening Our Friend Colby. It's about 2 pages, and it's kind of an absurdist short story from the 70s that I'm not going to get into. And we talked about it, and we talked about how it felt and what we did with it. And then we had cake at the end. So those are just a selection of meetings. All of them I thought were really rich. I selected, I think, the first 5 or 6, excuse me, and then folks co-facilitated the second, third, and fourth meetings, and they brought these other readings, good documentation practices on dialogue. Some of us had been threatening a friend Colby, and meetings as performance art. So now I want to hear, by way of sharing more about what you think about meetings and what you think about, feel about this kind of learning experience, let's take some time first in the chat to give folks some space to process. What have you been reading lately in relation to meetings, or absolutely not in relation to meetings, that is giving you some satisfaction? And the implicit obvious invitation here is to share them, not just in the chat, but maybe we'll share them in this shared drive. So yes, please, first in the chat for about 2 minutes. We'll have quiet time to share and type out what you've been reading lately, maybe drop some links, and then we'll change it up for open mic so folks can speak to it. This way, folks, as I said, get a little chance to process and think about what they've been reading lately. And maybe if you're listening to people talk live, like me, going on too long, it's hard to do so. Okay, so I'll keep time for 2 minutes. So a quarter of. Type in the chat what you've been reading lately. Feel free to drop as many links as you like. We'll get on mic, and then we'll tie it off with some final content from the zine. I'll let this go for one more minute because I said two, but folks keep sharing rich things, and I know it takes time to think and type for everyone. To one more minute, share what's on your reading list lately, if it's been giving you some kind of satisfaction, and we'll bring this to a close. Okay, so one more minute. I'd like to also now open up space if anyone wants to speak to something they've been reading lately. Let's have a be judicious. Think about the collective here. If you don't usually get a chance to speak or think out loud and you'd like to, this is your invitation. And if you tend to do that often and you feel all too willing and able, think of this as an opportunity to hear someone that you might not have otherwise gotten to meet. So is anyone here who'd like to speak to something they've been reading, maybe have not typed it out, or if you have, but still you want to speak to it because you feel strongly and you'd like to take the invitation, come off mic and go for it, or raise your hand if you prefer, either one.
I can speak to what I shared because I was like, oh, I haven't done any readings about meetings. But then I remembered this podcast that I just listened to like yesterday. It's David Bollier, like it's something about the Commons. He's a well-known like Commons guy. But it's all about artist collectives, and it was basically like, I mean, they interviewed artist collectives in Iran, in Latin America, and in I forget where else. I think somewhere in Europe, maybe in Germany. So he kind of went around the world interviewing artist collectives, and it was like meetings are all that they had. Like a couple of them were just saying that, you know, they don't have a lot of money, they don't have a lot of resources to share, but that like the meetings are actually the place, like the only place, the only thing that these collectives have. And it's where it's because of the meetings that these artists are able to do things, make art together. Like at the meeting was where, you know, they were able to say, okay, we're going to make this movie. We don't have any money, but we're still going to make the movie. We're going to use your phone, we're going to use your mom's house, and we're going to use you know, you're going to act in it. And it was like without the meeting they would not have been able to make the film, and they made like full feature film. So yeah, I think I don't know, just the power of gathering, especially for folks that don't have a lot of other resources, that can be the shared resource. The commons is the meeting, or the meeting is the commons.
Tim?
Did you say my name, Denny?
Oh, yes. Your
Okay,
turn.
because it got cut off a little bit, so I wasn't sure if it's me.
Oh, my fault.
Um,
Go ahead. Yeah, please.
yeah, unfortunately I don't have much time to read these days, but I want to say that I'm personally super interested in at least three different like resources, and so they're quite different, I want to say. And by the way, thank you so much for sharing this reading materials. I really want to look into them as well. Personally, I've been very, very interested in three things. So one of them is the Quakers traditions. The Society of Friends have been working on like doing like good meetings because it's like important for them on a very like fundamental level. And I think that's fascinating. And I really, really want to find a Quaker who would agree to join the Metagov seminar just to share that wisdom with us. I think that would be really interesting to try and like be able to learn from them because they have this amazing tradition. The other one is probably the least interesting for you, but I think it's kind of interesting. It's like Amazon meetings. I think that Amazon is very famous for their meetings, and they have developed their own culture about those meetings. Like they don't use slides. They always start with reading a memo. And so to me, it's like the complete opposite of what Quakers have been trying to do, right? And the third thing is just Sociocracy 3.0. I think it's a really interesting tradition in its own way, quite new. It's basically like a mixture of sociocracy with agile, but I think those guys, they've been thinking about good meetings very, very seriously, and they have published that as an like open source library of patterns that I'm going to share with you in the chat. Thank you.
Spirit of collaborating. I just took some notes for you, Artem, so put it in the chat. Okay. We've got a little less than 6 minutes left. I'm gonna take us to close. Whoops. What just happened? There it is. We had cake at the end, as I mentioned. There's cake at the end here too. You all can feast your eyes on this, I think, relatively gorgeous color palette of cakes, some vegan, because, you know, something for everyone. And I'm also going to share with you some more goodies. There is in the chat, the Bathers Library, for those of you who are in the broader Bay Area or you ever come and visit, is here. Christy is running a class. Lots of people do. It's a lovely art space, and they have events too. It's not just a low-cost art school for freaks. It's also a place downtown Oakland that has all kinds of mostly poetry and other literary or language stuff. But you know, once in a while, some other events, book talks, and this sort of thing too. There's also this zine that we put out, so you can purchase a hard copy from Bathers Library if you'd like. Oh, I'm on. The funny thing about Zoom, is that you have this bizarre, how do you call it? A canceling out or green screen effect. So I'm holding the zine. You all can't quite see it, but there, that's what it looks like. And it's a lithograph, sorry, a risograph print. There's the cover, and you've got the QR code to, I have to like smash it against my face so you can see it, to scan and add your own readings. And there's a quote on the back I want to read to you all. Oh my God. Okay. Let's try this. This is so tiring. I joined in part because I really fucking I really fucking hate meetings deep in my bones. But also, unfortunately for me, my politics sort of fall on the side of endless meetings. So it was somewhat therapeutic to explore that razor's edge. This is from a tenant rights lawyer who was one of the participants. And yeah, I also fucking hate meetings, but sometimes they're gorgeous and ways to, I think Val shared in that anecdote, a place to meet people and think of things. And so we had a little itty bitty opportunity to share some readings. I'm going to also share with you the digital copy of the zine since you're all here and some of you may be far away. If you do want to purchase it, it helps support Bathers Library, this low-cost art school for freaks. Come and visit. But I'm going to share with you also a copy of the digital zine in the chat, and then I'm going to send out after the fact a little thank you note through all the RSVPs, and you'll be able to get some of these links as well. And then finally, what I wanted to say is this Metagov community, some of you don't know it, some of you are new to it. You met Liz earlier on. I do suggest you check out metagov.org. It's really lovely. It's a lovely Slack community, one of the few that I've been in out of like maybe a dozen. I'm sure you all have a similar sort of life cycle or sort of a half-life of seeing Zoom and sort of signaled group chat and Slack spaces really give you social life during the early days of the pandemic. And some of them have sort of ebbed. But Metagov is a great Slack community and has seminars every Wednesday, almost every Wednesday, like this one, although different kinds. I'm trying to paste the link to the digital copy, and then I'm going to say goodbye. Give us a few minutes of breathing room before whatever we have next at the tyranny of the hour. There it is. Shoot, wait, didn't paste. So sorry. Well, while I try to get that link, does anyone want to have the last word? Anyone who hasn't had a chance to say anything yet or feels like they just want to effervesce in the chat, please, type anything you want to say on the way out, but also come on mic if you want to say anything just to tie us off at the end. Verbal or non-verbal? all forms of communication welcome to tie us off here.
And what's the best way
wanted
to
to say
communicate with you, Danny? Sorry.
Best way to keep in touch with me, you can email me at this email address. I have to go. And that's also in the syllabus, so you can find.
So you're often not on Slack. Okay, you're generally not on Slack.
Often not.
I mean,
no.
yeah, okay.
There was one other person who shared, and then let's call it a night.
Cool. I was just going to say everything feels like competing for attention. Everything feels like it's competing for my attention, so I find it hard to read lately. And that's kind of where I shared that link about the Fediverse and just, getting off of some of these networked with ads that are there to like keep you in and yeah, so I was curious about this meeting because I've been in the corporate world for a long time, and it's everything. Meetings feel like organizing people, and what does it look like for community workers to organize and either be more effective or just do something more purposeful with the time that we're all competing for. That's at various levels, at various capacities, and yeah, so I'm excited to go through these resources and learn more.
Thank you, Eddie. Thanks, everyone. Eddie, you have a great microphone setup, whatever it is. So thanks for adding on that excellent audio note. Speaking of embodiment materiality, I'm really glad everyone stayed. We have a few seconds left before the hour, the tyranny of these things being there. So let's say goodbye. Goodbye, everyone. I'm so glad we had this time together. I hope you all stay in touch. Check out Metagov, join the Slack. The chat will come around. Watch your emails and have a wonderful rest of your week. Take good care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for hosting.
Thanks, Danny.
Thanks,
That was
everyone.
great.
Thanks, Danny.
Appreciate it.
Danny.
Bye,
Thank you
everyone.
so much.
Bye. Bye. Adios.